All right, folks, it is high noon in Colorado, and we are so ready to kick off our lecture for the day. Welcome. If you are just joining, we are the Colorado Resiliency Arts Lab lecture series, and that series is called Enhancing Wellness for Healthcare Professionals Through Engagement with the Arts. So we are a lecture series sponsored by the Choral team, which is a group of researchers, creative arts therapists, and arts organizations, including 3 entities: the University of Colorado Researchers, Lighthouse Writers Workshop here in Denver, and the Ponzio Creative Arts Therapy Program here at Children's Hospital Colorado, the building in which I'm sitting. So my name is Catherine Reed. I am an art therapist who is both the leader of that creative arts therapy program at Children's and a very proud member of Choral. We are a group, like I already said, of researchers, and we are studying the effect of creative arts therapy interventions on symptoms of burnout for healthcare professionals to see if those interventions could be potential mitigators for the symptoms of burnout. So we've been around for about almost 5 years. We've had a lot of exciting press lately, including a story in the Colorado Public Radio world. And so Rafaela might be putting some of those links in our chat so you can see those. Today, however, we are not here to talk about Choral. Specifically, we are here to host a lecture by Heather Stuckey. Heather is the associate professor of medicine, humanities, and public health sciences at Penn State University. We're really excited to have her today because her interest is so connected to our research focus. Heather has conducted research in the arts and healing using creative expression through meditation, shape making, and photography to communicate deep and often hidden core beliefs about living with a disease. She's an experienced qualitative researcher, and her goal is to bring both the imaginative world of the arts together with the outcomes of science to further the field of arts and health. So we are super excited about her presentation today. It's called Here Comes the Sun: How Research Can Illuminate the Patient Experience of Art and Well-Being. So just a couple of logistics before we get started. I want to remind everyone who might be in the call that Dr. Stuckey will be presenting for about the first 40 minutes of this call. And what we're looking for is, as you watch her speak and you get curious about something specific, feel free to pop a question in the question and answer section of the Zoom call versus the chat. So I will be moderating those questions and asking them to Heather directly in the last 10, 15, 20 minutes of this conversation so that your question will be asked directly to her. And that way we will be having a conversation. Even though you won't be on the screen, she'll be able to answer you directly. So that being said, I am proud and excited to introduce Heather Stuckey, and we will all be here listening. Thanks so much, Heather, for joining us.
That's a lovely introduction because it describes my life. My life with not really fitting in the scientific realm because of my love and passion for the arts. Very often it was viewed as something extra or something not needed in science. And I said, no, it's needed, and we need it for our patients. We need it for us. We need it for continuation of the field of research. So I realize that not all of you are researchers on this call. So it takes us on a realm of anywhere from, if you're skeptical about research, to all the way to I'm in and I understand it and I want to know more about that. And so today we're going to have a few objectives. I'm going to talk about well-being in the arts and what research actually can do and how to help how to help patients. We are going to discuss some research methods and measures, but maybe if you're all interested in that, a future presentation could be very, very specific on every single measure that I know of, of how you can use the arts in healing. But I'm going to present some of the more common ones to you today, just so you have an idea of what you could delve into, what that would even look like. And really what I'm trying to do now through some of the grants that are coming through the National Endowment of the Arts and through some of my behavioral diabetes research, quite honestly, that's being conducted in the arts, really trying to raise the bar for us in the arts field so that we're taken seriously and that we are taken as a strong force, that healing matters, that we're part of that healing process. So research aims to understand what works, and it's a systematic process that I do it to improve the lives of patients, clients, and participants. Why did I get interested in this? That's sometimes a question that people have. And I got into it because I thought that we're not really doing evaluation of programs as efficiently as we could. People would say that they like a program in the arts, but I wanted to know more. Like, what about the program? What's exciting you about this? How does this help with your healing? What's important for us to continue to do? What don't we need to do anymore? So it started really in the arts, and the first dissertation that I did was using creative expression in the arts in diabetes care to try to have people make meaning of their disease. What is it like to have diabetes? Research involves a lot of problem solving. I love it for that reason, because I think we as artists also are always problem solving and figuring out, what do I want to put here? What do I want to do there? And also, we're fact checking. Even if we don't call it fact checking, right? We're checking with our experience and the experience of others to reach new knowledge. There's a French term, it's recherche, and it is where research comes from, and it actually means to seek. So if you think of research as an act of seeking in a systematic way, that's kind of cool. That's where I come from in my world. And so how do I do that? Well, there's basically 3 different kinds of research that apply to the arts, and they're qualitative research, quantitative research, and then a mixed methods piece. And I'm going to give you the fastest and shortest lesson on this, because I know some of you on the call are very familiar. Others, this might not be as familiar. So when we speak of quantitative data, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about things that you can possibly measure. They're numbers of things. They're values that we might have. They are satisfaction on a survey on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe it's someone's weight. Maybe it's someone's blood sugar reading or their resting heart rate. All of these things are data that we would put in a quantitative realm. And then we have qualitative data, of which I have done a lot of work in, especially again in the diabetes world. But I'm interested in this because sometimes the quantitative data don't show us enough about like maybe we know someone's weight, but we don't know, well, how did they get to that weight, right? That would be a qualitative question. These are data that look more or less at the meaning of an event or an experience based on some kind of research question, something that we're curious about that we want to, quote, seek. And so examples here most likely are interviews, they are maybe focus groups with individuals, which would mean more than one person in an interview. We can conduct observations. I love observations because you can see what people are like in their real life, or you can see what artists are doing with the participants in the program that might be nonverbal, that can't be expressed through interviews alone. So it's also can be art-based. Often qualitative work can be metaphorical. For instance, we could ask patients or people to write down, what do you think healing would look like to you, for example, and maybe they'll draw something and we can ask them and interpret that. And that can also be considered qualitative data. Lastly, mixed methods is really a combination of the two, where you use quantitative and qualitative to come together. There's sometimes, I use this a lot because it's not that I think that one or the other is better. It's just that I think some research questions are more quantitative in nature, like, how are people experiencing distress on a scale, so that I can then understand, how to ask better qualitative questions about that. And that would be called an explanatory approach, where the quantitative just aren't quite enough and the qualitative helps add to that. And there's also exploratory approaches where you start with qualitative data and maybe you make it into a survey and say, wow, I want to know not only with this population, but with populations all over, what are some of the more generalizable things? And so I make a survey out of that, and that would be taking qualitative data and putting it into quantitative measures. So I told you that I got into this because I was into the arts. I loved it. My undergrad was in the arts and every form. But I also had diabetes. I have type 1 diabetes since I've been 12. And because I had a curious mind and was seeking, I guess I just didn't find the right doctor right away. Or I didn't feel like I was being treated as a patient. I felt like I was being treated as a number. When I would go in, I remember my doctors always saying, well, your diabetes is out of control and you have to make your numbers better. And numbers in later years were A1Cs and just basically blood sugar readings or continuous glucose monitor readings. And I thought, there has to be more to life than this. How could we ask patients, instead of how are your numbers, what if people ask, how was I feeling? How was I doing? I just thought that would have rocked the world. And even though I was maybe only 15 or 16, I realized at that age, young age, that I think we could do better and in our health system. And maybe we could even use art as a way to do that. But really, if my physicians, if my clinicians took a look at me and saw me as more of a person than just that number, I bet that would be really interesting. And that started me on a path of what I wouldn't have even called research. I just was really asking friends and family, well, how you're treated during a visit? How do you feel? And they're like, well, we're a number, we're a weight, we're a blood pressure, we're a cholesterol, we're a, whatever you are. And we're not really treated differently. So I started, the very first thing that I did was I started to ask friends about this. I realized that I could do this systematically when I was in college, and that it actually was so interesting to me because I was just, that bit of curiosity is what can take on research. So my life has really been devoted to behavioral change in diabetes research And there was a study of 17 different countries, 10,000 people were involved. It was so fascinating to just see everyone's response on a survey that was both closed-ended and open-ended about their experience. And then when I can bring in the arts, it even makes me more excited. So I want to show you a little bit about where we are in the field of arts, because I love to not only do qualitative and quantitative research, but I really pay attention a lot to where we are with the arts and healing. And so I'm sure many of you are familiar with PubMed. That's where most of our citations from our biomedical literature come from. That's where most of the arts and health literature comes from. I have a link on there if anyone after the presentation would like to click on any of these links that are embedded within here. They're there for you to study and look at. You can search anything just by Googling stuff on PubMed, and it will bring up interesting articles that maybe you want to know more about, quote, music therapy and depression or something along those lines. And you can just be curious and kind of look at what kind of articles have been done. So for qualitative work, there's been 677 research articles to date. And quantitative, there have been 787. And the last time that I looked at this was actually in 2020. And at that time, there were almost about half that number, both in qualitative and quantitative. So we are by far doing a lot of research in the creative arts. So you can see the search terms that I used there. One's just qualitative and one quantitative, but I was just interested in knowing how many there were. Now, what there are is another story. And so there is this amazing database called Aero Data Lab by the University of Rhode Island. Some of you may be familiar with this already, but I really do want to take a moment to click on this because this is one of those things that blew my mind when I first saw it. And continues to blow my mind, actually. So what it talks about is how do art-based interventions affect their health? And there's this really long report that they've done. So kudos to the University of Rhode Island. But what is fascinating about this to me is that on the x-axis, or in other words, the horizontal axis, what you see in the arts is the different kinds of interventions that we've had. So this is all arts-based interventions on the left, and then there's dance, there's drama, there's multi-domains, meaning more than one, there's music, and there's writing. So those are the domains. And then on the left, what you see is a really long list of all kinds of things and disease states and even elderly, people, what's been done in the research. What's cool now is when you combine the X and the Y axes, and you can see where all these articles that just pop up that connect with music in this case, and I think cancer and cardiac. Those are two of the larger areas because you can see the larger the bubble around it, the more articles there are. So I'm just going to stop that for a second. And you can see like here's music therapy and cardiac procedures. So, and as you explore this, I'm going to have Rafaela put this in the link, actually. If something particularly interests you, you can click on that. And as you can see, I just talked about PubMed being our sort of library that we look to for the arts and medicine. And then here you can see the comparison of music therapy on the verbalization behavior of pediatric patients, for instance, and you can read about it if you're interested or see what some of the results are about. So, and it's that way with almost everything in here. So you can see when you just hover over it, that shows you what is done. So like here's dementia and music therapy. There's more in music therapy, as you can see, than any other field, which doesn't surprise maybe any of us. But, here's some dance things. And if you're interested in this, belly dancing, here we go. And there's some different kinds of things. There's an aerobic exercise intervention for Latinas. So I encourage you to play with this to see where we are in the field. I think it's a fascinating look at where we are, and it's interactive. So it's not boring. It's something that's just super informative, as well as just really interesting for people. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Now I'm going to share my PowerPoint again with you, and we'll return back to where we were. My apologies about that. I just think it's so cool to share that website with Rhode Island, because they put so much work into it, and it just shows you all there's 481 studies that evaluate the health effects on an art-based program. So there's also this article that I think Dr. Nobel and he was on the last call. We're good friends, and I worked for the Foundation for Art and Healing for quite a while as their director of research. And so we had done a scoping review of the literature, and there's some individuals such as Dr. Sankey, Jill Sankey, and others who are doing more updated to the research, to the literature. But this was one of the first ones that was actually done, published in the American Journal of Public Health. So this talks about the effects on music engagement, visual arts, movement, and expressive writing. So it's still another article that's pretty much cited in the literature as being a foundation for how we can begin looking at the connection between art, healing, and public health. Okay, so now I just want to show you one qualitative study so you can have an example of what is this? I don't quite understand qualitative. Well, this is, I chose this article in particular because it talks about, well, we'll talk about sun later with our idea about here comes the sun, but it also is talking about how can we ask the public about what their idea of healing is, and how can that help healthcare professionals understand a little bit more about how people perceive healing. So what happened is that visitors who were going to a large well-being show and a museum were asked to draw using crayons and paper and respond to the question, what does the word healing mean to you? There was a small, short recorded interview in which people were able to explain their image. And then they analyzed these images and interviews using a focus on metaphor and what happened. So there were 60 people who documented 3 main models of this healing process. And healing comes from a great external force. They called it the sun. Here comes the sun. Healing comes from other people. And then healing also comes from within. Now, that's all kind of intuitive when you think about it, but the images that were there are absolutely amazing. When you have a moment, I'd like to have you look at some of the hospital exhibits that were done after this presentation. After this research was done, there were more hospital exhibitions that followed that. There were 2. And so now they have some exhibits within the hospital and within different research spaces where all of these images of what healing means is there. So they found this, and they're applying for more funding to be able to get more power behind this so that we can begin to have an even better understanding of what healing means from multiple perspectives. I'd like to take a minute to talk about this because it also directly relates to arts and a project that I'm currently working on, which is,
Excuse me, Heather, your slides
yes.
are not being shared. Could you
Oh, my
share for us?
apologies.
Thank you.
Well, then let's go back. Let's try that again, huh? So that's okay. I'm doing a mask making project. Is that sharing?
Yes, it's sharing.
Is
I
that
just need to
sharing?
see the
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, certainly. My apologies. Don't you love it? Okay. So all you missed was this. That's all you missed. Okay. There's on the bottom left, there's some links that you'll be able to look at. So that's okay. This though, I do want you to really see, because it involves a mask making project. The Penn State Department of Medicine said, you know, we want to do an arts project with our medical students who are coming in. And we want to do a study that relates to how they're feeling about being a doctor. And so we took an approach, we meaning one of the physicians who and educators at the medical school and we conducted a mixed method study and are continuing to conduct it because it's an ongoing project. And we have the qualitative aspects, which are the masks themselves that people are making and the reflective narratives. And then we have quantitative, which is the imposter syndrome scale. So let me just go back to the prompt before I move on to the actual masks. So the first prompt that we gave individuals who were coming in during their first week of medical school was that they were supposed to think back to their white coat ceremony. And who were you then? What did you hope to accomplish in medical school? What were your aspirations? And take the next 45 minutes to create a mask that embodies your identity at that time, right at the beginning of medical school. So this was a retrospective of an event for them to think about that. And we provided them with the masks. We provided them at that time with just paints. And then they were also supposed to think about themselves now as a fourth year medical student. They're graduating, they're moving on to residency. How have they gotten to this moment? Who are they now? What role do they play in the medical sphere? And how do you feel about your medical school experience as a whole? So they were taking the next 45 minutes to create a mask that represented who they were as they prepare to graduate. So these are 4 sets of masks. The first one is on the top left, the 2. The one is of, again, a sun. And then it's sort of a, flowing rainbow type looking mask. And the bottom left, as I'm looking at it, would be also the same kind of thing, like an orangish yellow color. And then again, these sort of spirals and things that are going on. The top right has a little bit more going on in the head area. And the bottom one, it goes from like a curiosity standpoint to really like, he said integration. So we asked them not only what they were doing while they were doing it and observing and watching them with this mask and the process of doing it, but we also asked them, what does this mean? And when we saw all 150 masks, which is usually what our school enters each year, 120 students to Penn State main campus and 30 to our University Park campus, we we were able to see patterns in them. And we wrote a paper on this that is reflective of how they were able to, when they first came in, they had a very little understanding of what really medicine was. And they thought it was pretty black and white and cut and dry. And by the end of it, they thought it's more like an organized chaos. That's what was sort of said in all of them, or more an integrated chaos, that they knew more technically, but it felt like it was also that they had more questions regarding that. So it's an interesting exercise that we continue to do every year. This is another mask that someone had done, said 4 years ago, I thought I would come away with an MD teeming, brimming, and overflowing with knowledge. I thought I'd be certain about how to treat my patients. I thought my future mask would be colorful, mosaic throughout. This isn't how the journey works. The reason I'm really wanting to talk to you about this study is, so we did them a couple of different ways, all right? And I can imagine you starting off on your, you might think, well, I want to do research, but I have no idea what that means. Well, we didn't either. We were educated in research. We knew what we were doing or should be doing, but when you go to do it in reality, it looks so much different. So we did this retrospective account first. That was one of the things that we had done. These are 4 articles that we published from this, and we have another one coming out. So that was the first phase of this. The second phase of it is that we tried to do it first year students, and then every year for 4 years. And we tried that, and we couldn't get all the masks back, so we had like a half data set for that. So you can't really, we learned that we need to take pictures of these things before they disappear, or collect them or something. So this year, this July, we're starting a process. Our dean has given us $12,000 to conduct this year, $12,000 for the next year, to be able to see if now what we're trying to do is take these masks and see what else we can learn about them other than how they're feeling about themselves. But we're also trying to predict if people take this exercise seriously, are they going to be more humanistic physicians in the end? Depending on what they put on their mask, how does that predict what field they might even be in? We're very interested in following this over time, not for disciplinary reasons, not for judgmental reasons, but is there actually connection in their first year that we can identify who might have, well, first of all, a greater imposter syndrome, who might need more help. But secondly, can we predict those who are going to be more humanistic in their approach by how seriously they take the exercise, how contemplative they are, how reflective they are? And then lastly, just by how attentive they are to the process, does that show any idea of what their future plans might be? So it's sort of an interesting way of looking at it, and we're going to be doing those research projects very shortly. So what do you do? Well, if you think you want to start on qualitative research, it's really helpful if you want to do exploratory or pilot work to just start thinking about, how would I put this together? What would I study? I'll show you a couple examples in a second, but if we want to add depth or understanding from quantitative data, or if you have another person, like sometimes we partner with another institution who's doing participatory arts health research, and maybe we can find out from them, hey, if we do this in parallel, can we understand this a little bit better? Can we do this together? So when you're thinking about your measures, like, what the heck do I measure? Okay, it's really interesting that maybe I want to start doing research. What do I measure? Well, you have to first think about what do you hope that your patients get from doing this activity that you're working on. So for us, it's sometimes, like in the things that I said, I want to know about how people are making meaning of their diabetes. I want to understand that so that we can treat them more holistically. I want to be able to, in the other study, we want to understand what healing is. We don't know how patients even perceive that word. How can that be conceptualized through art and through understanding of interviews? And this last one was mask making. How can we build more humanistic leaders? How can we identify those? What are those qualities? And how can that bring sort of sun to our patients? How can all of these things bring better wellness to our healthcare professionals, to our patients, to us? The most researched quantitative measures at this point, other than things like weight and heart rate variability and things that are biomedical, are more on the psychosocial side. They are the quality of life, engagement with others. There's something called the SF-36. That means a short form with 36 different questions on it about quality of life. There's even some quality of life measures for a specific disease. You can literally Google these things. If you work with a researcher or someone who knows like what they are, validated tools are always better to use than non-validated, especially if you're looking to publish, because that will, certainly increase the validity and actually the inter-rater reliability of what it is that you're researching. So stress is another one that people often measure, anxiety, and then meaning itself. On a scale of 1 to 10, how did this help you understand more about your disease? How did this help you understand more about living with your illness? Did this bring new meaning to your life with chronic disease? These are all quantitative type measures. And we all know, especially, those of you in arts therapy and those of you who are artists, we know in our hearts what helps people relax. We seem to have that skill of what helps them make meaning. We have ideas of what it is that we need to do as arts therapists or as artists or as teachers or as researchers to help them. So I'm encouraging you to think on your journey of research, if you're so choose to accept it, think about what would be amazing if you knew this, like what patients benefited most from what I'm doing, or why are they more engaged? Why are the older adults more engaged than the younger adults? What part of what I'm doing is most effective? Like I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff, but geez, is all of it effective, equally effective? What do people think is more effective? What is effective? How do I even want to define effective? What even is my outcome? What am I trying to do? What kind of combinations of things work? And then I just sort of let that a ... If you knew, like, think about what would be amazing if you knew this about the work that you were doing or the patients that you have, how could they benefit? And that's where you begin. Research does not limit your creativity. If you say, oh, I have to become a researcher, that's not the goal. The goal is for you to be you. The goal is absolutely for you to be you. But to think about how could you frame your work in some way where you could where you could measure or at least begin to understand more about what's going on? And is it possible to even take that and work with someone in your area? You probably have some connection to a researcher or Coral or Penn State or anywhere within, a university or place, community that's near you. How can you work with someone, a researcher or another person who has experience with research, and help them think through with you how to set up an evaluation, I guess, essentially, or an intervention of how you could begin to use research to help make your work stronger, to help you understand more about your work, ultimately to help publish your work so that it gets out there, or present your work so that people can know more about it. And even then, we can get more grant money. The more publications, the more you're out there, the more grant money can come in. And I'm all about getting money for the arts. It has the potential to really, if nothing else, to really have you stop and think about what you're trying to accomplish and why you're running this program. Why am I doing this? Oh, I want people to go away feeling just more relaxed. I want them to take away all the stress of what they've been dealing with this hospital admission. I'd like them to be more relaxed. Well, how could you set up any kind of research to check to see if that's what's actually happening? It would be so fascinating if we could all just work together to put a little bit more, I guess I just see both the art and the science within research, and I see the art and the science within the arts. My whole life is kind of devoted to putting these together. And I use the context of diabetes because that's what I know. That came out of my heart, my experience, my research. I went on to get a postdoc in endocrinology so that I would understand even more. But if we say that the arts can't be measured or defined, then it doesn't really help to move the field forward. Where I am afraid that if we just are looked upon as being nice to do or something that is extra but not essential, that our voices are a little muffled. And I want to be able to move the whole field in a better way so that we can begin to get more recognition and more funding. I just believe that collaboration is everything with this, that none of us can do this ourselves. Like, I can't run an art program the way that you can, and you might not be able to do research the way I can, or vice versa in any way. And just to be able to find other people to connect, if research interests you at all, to just begin to think about what is it that I would want to do, and how can I set up a collaboration with other people to be able to move the field forward and to see more of that sunshine that comes through. So I appreciate your time. And I think we're here for questions.
Heather, thank you so much. That was so rich, juicy. It was juicy.
Mm-hmm.
And so far we only have a couple questions, but I've got plenty. So
Okay,
I know that we will have a lively conversation. Let's start with the one question that's been submitted. This one was submitted by Jasmine Chu. And just for introduction, Jasmine I happen to know her personally because she is our arts coordinator here at Children's Hospital Colorado. That means she curates all of our exhibitions in our fine art gallery. And she also manages the collection and she creates programming. So she's non-clinical, not an arts therapist, but really connected to the community, making sure that we're bringing community arts into the hospital and helping the hospital reflect the community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's who she is. And she is very interested to know more about the exhibitions you mentioned in terms of the images of what healing is by the participants.
Okay, awesome. Well, let me see. Yeah, so the two let me pull that up. Because I think you're going to get a copy of these slides so you can see them, but I think the interesting thing is there's an art installation. I'm going to put this up and then I'm going to share it. It's the Einstein Garden, and it's called Heartfelt. Let me just share what I'm looking at so you can see it. And hopefully, hold on a minute. Don't you love it? It's talking about an interactive experience engaging with healing, and it was developed by Einstein's Garden in collaboration with researchers from the University of Exeter. And I just found that this was really cool. So I am trying to share it here.
Heather, where is that? Where's Exeter? I don't even know.
You know,
I should know.
I should know too. Does anybody know?
England.
England, thank
That's what
you.
I was thinking, but
Okay.
so there's a bit about it right here. If when you have a moment, you can click on that Heartfelt. Here it is. This is a really cool exhibit of how they do, and there's these wooden hearts that they express on how they're healing and how they work with this heartbeats chamber, this circular tent. Here it is. This is what I was looking for, this circular tent that just got them to really think about what healing is, what's in their hearts, what is happening in this space. I think that one of the more difficult things that I have as a researcher, not as an artist, but as a researcher, is to try to figure out, is it the activity that we're doing? Is it the activity that we're doing that's making the difference? Or is it because we're together that's making the difference? Because the social connection, this was all about a social connection and the artist's work that was happening there. So even in the exhibition space, like I just think knowing that you're creating the art for someone and that's going to be shared, I think automatically has some sort of healing aspect to it, regardless of what it even is that we're asked to do. And I think that's going to be the $1 million question to answer in the future is, does it matter if I use, an exhibit, or does it matter if I use a paper and pencil and have people do this? How do I know what is really going to be most effective within this space? And I just always wonder about the collective and the fact that we know we're going to be sharing our work. How is that different from healing that we do on our individual journeys, where we don't exactly expect to share our work, but they're more individual reflections? How does that differ? And what does the impact of social relationships on the art actually have on us? So when you get those PowerPoint presentations, if you pour into both of those, there's also an article that's connected to that 2019 article about the healing. There's one in 2017 that was done that was also, it didn't use the art form, it just used the interviews. So there's one from 2017, one from 2019, and then these two pieces that are actually exhibits that were done after the healing project.
So as I look at this image, Heather, and listen to your words around this experience and, with research, really trying to study and delineate what was it about this experience that was effective, so to speak, or right? I'm noticing all kinds of things. Number one, there's a real indigenous influence. Like when you look at this image, this does not look like a typical Western medicine environment, right? You're in a yurt, a circular tent. You're sitting on the ground. It looks like maybe on burlap, and you're sitting in a circle. So it's like the hierarchy of our medical institutions is it's not present in that circle. It doesn't show up in the same way, which seems to allow everyone in that circle to be human together, right? Instead of like the way we often are in healthcare, which is like, which level am I on? Who am I allowed to talk to? How do I show up? And then who shows up? Whose voice is heard the loudest? So I wanted to recognize that influence like this. To me, when I think about healing, this looks like knowledge that is far beyond or before or elsewhere than Western medicine. So it's exciting to think about those knowledge centers integrating. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And I also see in here just the collaboration that's there and the laughter that's there. And I just this is where observation would be a better tool to use in researching, like, what's really happening here? Well, even if you just take this snapshot, which isn't live, of course, you could, you can see the people how the people are sitting, the tent, there's so much to observe in this that may be missed if you just would have asked the question, like in the interview of, well, what was this experience like for you? I mean, that's part of it. That would be really important to know individually, but just by sight, they may not mention where they were or how they were interacting. And that's something that observation can bring to the research process, as well as the actual interviews or the art projects that they bring forward.
Awesome. Okay, we're getting some good questions now. People are joining us. Okay, so Hillary Sin is our dance movement therapist, who is one of the creators and facilitators of the choral dance workshop for healthcare professionals. And so I'm just going to read what she wrote to you. Okay, Heather. And there is a question embedded. It says, Heather, you're awesome and your work is awesome. Thank you so much. With a modality like movement and dance that has so much interactive complexity, are there any particular resources or researchers that you're aware of that have started to identify specifics of what is healing about dance? I have my own ideas, but I'm just wondering what research may be saying about this.
Yeah. Wow. That's an excellent question. So when you go to, so first of all, I don't have 100% answer for you right now, but I do see dance is one of those areas. Actually, all of the physical movement is taking more strides. So for a long time, what it was, I'm seeing trends in the literature where there was always more about music therapy. And then there was more about visual arts. But only in the last 2 years have I seen more research come through on dance and movement therapies. So I don't have an exact answer for you, but I think you're going to find it really interesting to see if you go on that Aerodata lab and you can see dance and movement, that's from up until 2019. So it's still fairly recent. I think you'll find it really cool to see that. There's a lot of, if you really are interested and you want to dig even further into the articles, you can read about the procedure of what they actually did during that movement therapy or during that dance therapy. Because there's, I don't know, an infinite number of ways in which we could, teach this, nearly an infinite number. So they're pretty good, especially in those peer-reviewed articles that are in that paper, of showing what aspects were more helpful and how they were helpful to individuals and how they defined healing. So I think rather than give you one answer, which I don't have, or I'd give it to you, I'm going to give you that, refer to that. Even this is where you can look on that PubMed site, PubMed.gov. It's just like Google then from there, basically. So, and, you can say dance and hopefulness or something like that and see what comes up. And, that's what I'm just doing right now. And you don't know. music interventions, there we go again, for improving psychological and physical outcomes. So we have to see, the other thing is that the music and the benefits of dance are also tied together. So you have to be a little bit careful about that, right? Because there's movement. But what happens with movement? Well, movement also takes place with music. What takes place with, so it's kind of the combination that I always just find interesting on how you would separate those two. Just like my personal dilemma is, how do I separate this social aspect from the making of art, right? I think you're also going to have to take a look at how the music might be, if you're interested in the music that you're choosing, or if you're interested more in the process of how they're teaching the dance to the individuals, you probably will find a variety of information on both of those. And they definitely do show, there are systematic reviews of the benefit of dance with children and with adults. So you can see what some of the physiological and psychological benefits actually are, if you just take a look at that. And I'm looking even in the dance now, I see most of the dance and cancer research popping up as being the area, and dance and elderly is another large area of research, as well as movement and Parkinson's disease. So that's what's currently trending in the literature.
All right, so we just have a few minutes. Heather, I do want to ask you one more question from
I'm sorry, I could talk here all day. So
one of our previous lecturers, actually, Amy Zielinski, has a quick question, and then we're going to have to end in just like 3 minutes. So,
yeah, I know.
She says, thank you for an inspiring talk. I wonder how we can create humanities-informed research methods. Performance ethnography comes to mind, but are there other forms we can create? Curious about your thoughts.
Sure. So I do love to do photo voice, which is a technique of using cameras, giving them to people and having them use their own work, their own environment to inform healthcare professionals as to what they're living with, the living conditions that they're in. I also use observation, which I consider to be a visual form of photography. It's just that I happen to be the camera. And also photo elicitation, using those during interviews, I find to be extremely helpful, to be able to have people bring in found objects of what they hold most dear to them, what has brought them healing, to actually have them do that rather than words alone. It's a great conversation starter and also facilitator of healing.
Well, Heather Stuckey, I just want to say thank you so tremendously much for sharing your perspective and your information and your really fresh energy around these topics. It's really provided, I think, not only, resources, which we all need, but really that passion to continue building these bridges between the world of science and the world of the arts. I mean, it's a natural collaboration, and I'm just so excited that we're seeing it so clearly through eyes like yours.
Yeah.
So I want to let everyone know, as we say goodbye to Heather Stuckey today, that we do have another lecture scheduled in May. That's on May 19th. And we will be inviting and hosting Brittany Martin, who is an arts educator with a PhD in business. She is specialized in teaching art, dance, drama, literature, and music, plus ways to integrate these arts into the core subjects. She is a tenured associate professor of education at the University of Calgary, and her portfolio includes classroom teaching, consulting services, and leadership roles, both managerial and research. So that'll be a great talk as well. Heather, thank you so much for today.
Sure.
And thank you all in the audience for supplying questions. Please know that these lectures are recorded and saved on our website that Rafaela mentioned earlier in the chat. And I hope everyone has a beautiful weekend. Thanks again, Heather.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.